This is the new Mazda CX-5, which really isn't all that new, now is it? Like the upcoming 2026 Toyota RAV4, under the skin, it is a refresh of the old Mazda CX-5, which in itself was a refresh of the even older Mazda CX-5. Now, full disclosure here, the reason that we haven't actually made a video on the CX-5 until now was, frankly, we and many other outlets were not invited to see the Mazda CX-5 or even given information pre-embargo. I honestly thought this was quite weird at first. I reached out to Mazda and they have explained to me since that it was actually because so many people were linking the vehicle that Mazda head office, even though I think this is a really bad decision, they just completely shut down the publications that they were willing to share this with. So apologies that this is a little bit late, but all of it is still very relevant, especially considering the Mazda CX-5 itself, it really hasn't changed much, has it? I just want to make it clear to Mazda, because I know that you are watching right now, especially Mazda Japan. I just don't think that that is a good tactic to limit who you share this information with. It kind of just seems like you're playing favorites, which is never ideal. But that is not the reason I'm making this video. When I was researching the Mazda CX-5, I was pretty disappointed, right? It's just a big refresh of the previous Mazda CX-5, which made me think, is it a money issue? Like, what is going on? So as a team, we've done the research, we've looked into it, and right now it is not looking good for Mazda. And that is a shame because I really respect the company. I love what they've done with so many of their cars. Mazda MX-5 comes to mind. Of course, the older RX-7, RX-8, some really cool cars. They've been able to really stretch their dollar. However, they've made some pretty terrible decisions as a company, invested their money in the wrong places, and based on all the evidence I have, they are not going down a good path, and it's honestly quite scary. So I'm gonna tell you everything you need to know today. Before we talk about the Mazda CX-5 itself, let's talk about the state of Mazda, because this context is crucial to understanding where this new CX-5 fits. Now, all of my stats and figures are actually straight from Mazda's own March 2025 production and financial results, and what it shows is a company at a real crossroads. Globally, Mazda's sales grew by 5% over the past year, and that is not bad on the surface, of course, but when you look closer, most of that growth was actually propped up almost entirely by the United States, which jumped 16%. Meanwhile, China, one of Mazda's biggest markets, dropped an absolutely brutal 23%. And even in Japan, where Mazda's domestic sales fell for most of the year, they managed to claw back some momentum in March, thanks in part to a spike in the Mazda 2 and the outgoing CX-5. But it's not all good news for the CX-5. Production of the current generation was down over 22% year on year, and exports followed the same trend. Now, to be fair, Mazda is of course winding this model down, but they are also shifting their focus to a wave of new premium SUVs, namely the CX-60, 70, 80, and 90, all of which saw increases in output and shipments. But here's the concerning part. Despite the bump in sales, Mazda's actual profits dropped really hard. Operating income was down 26%, and net income fell a massive 45% year on year. The company pointed to increased competition, reduced wholesale deliveries, and the cost of fixing product quality issues. Now, that last part of quality issues is particularly troubling when the so-called premium SUVs they're betting on, particularly the CX-60 and CX-90, have been receiving a lot of criticism for clunky transmission calibration and less than polished ride comfort. They're up to either their third or fourth fix in Australia alone for the suspension issue, for example. On top of that, Mazda is facing serious pressure from the New Vehicle Efficiency Standard, or NVES, in Australia. And Australia, by the way, is one of Mazda's biggest markets. So this is a government policy, and it forces car makers to cut their average emissions across all new vehicles with increasingly strict targets each year. If they do not meet these targets, they are fined. Now, Mazda has no fully electric car on sale in Australia right now after discontinuing the extremely mediocre MX-30 EV. And while plug-in hybrids like the CX-60 are slowly rolling out, it's nowhere near enough to offset high emission models like the BT50 Ute and older petrol-only SUVs. Now, there are reports that Mazda will likely bring in the EZ6 sedan and EZ60 SUV to Australia to help with this NVES compliance. And interestingly, these are electric vehicles co-designed and manufactured by Chinese company Chang'an. But here's the catch: unless Mazda can price them at Chinese car levels, which would be challenging given their premium brand positioning they're going for, they'll need to sell massive volumes to meaningfully offset the emissions from their petrol and diesel heavy lineup. And that is definitely a big ask in a market where consumers are still hesitant about EV adoption and increasingly price conscious, not to mention the sheer amount of new electric cars coming into Australia that are very good. Zeekr 7X, Xpeng G6, BYD Sea Lion 7. I could go on. In fact, the current CX-5 is already in breach of the NVES emissions threshold, which means Mazda will be fined every time they sell one. The updated 2.5-litre engine has been detuned now to help lower emissions slightly, but without a hybrid option at launch, which it's not getting, it's essentially just a stopgap. It is not a long-term solution. Now, Mazda has admitted publicly that NVES compliance will be tough and that new EVs won't arrive any sooner despite regulation. And that means that either prices go up to cover penalties or profit margins shrink even further. And if you think Mazda can just fall back on the American market to stay afloat, think again. While recent trade negotiations have reduced the tariffs from the initially proposed terrible 25% to 15%, that's better, that's still a significant burden on Japanese-made cars under the new protectionist trade policy by Trump. Even at 15%, this puts serious pressure on Mazda's profits from one of its most important markets and one of the only ones that's actually properly growing. So put that all together. Mazda is facing profit erosion, regulatory pressure in Australia, falling sales in China, mounting global competition, and now a 15% tariff burden in the US, the very market that's currently holding up their global sales number. Now, with that context in mind, let's talk about the 2026 Mazda CX-5. And to be clear, this is the new CX-5, and it's not the outgoing one we've been discussing. On paper, Mazda claim this is an all-new generation. In reality, it's more of a heavy facelift, to be generous. Let's start with the good. The exterior design is classic Mazda, elegant, refined, instantly recognizable, and it's grown in all dimensions, giving it more presence on the road and stretching the wheelbase to open up more interior room. But while it looks fresh, this is very much an evolution of the current CX-5. If you've seen the outgoing model, this one won't surprise you. It's got the same silhouette, a similar face, just cleaner and more sculpted. And to be fair, that is not a bad thing. And inside, I think Mazda have actually done a genuinely great job. Again, testament to Mazda. They are really able to stretch their dollar, being one of the smallest OEMs globally, which not a lot of people actually know. The cabin is a huge step up. It is more spacious, it is more upmarket. There's a new massive 15.6-inch touchscreen, they're learning from the Chinese, a new digital instrument cluster, much improved tech, though the rotary dial is now gone, RIP, because we really like that. Not to mention, it was literally just a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that Mazda were refusing to put touchscreens in their car because they said it was unsafe. And now it's touchscreen only and the biggest one you could possibly get, which is, that's backtracking, I guess. The materials inside, they're also elevated, and even the rear seats and boot space have been meaningfully improved. But there is one change that is a huge step back. Mazda has actually removed the physical climate control buttons. Everything now goes through a touchscreen, which is just a step back for usability. Having driven hundreds of other cars that do the exact same thing and remove the air conditioning controls, put it into the display, it is so frustrating when you're just driving and you want to quickly adjust the temperature, especially when you don't want to take your eyes off the road. Again, we will have to reserve our judgment until we see it, and I kind of wish Mazda just let us see it. Still, overall, there's no doubt this is the nicest CX-5 cabin yet, and you would hope so. But under the bonnet, it is a totally other story. At launch, Australia will get the same old 2.5-litre naturally aspirated petrol engine, except now it's detuned to just 132 kilowatt and 242 newton meters. That is down from 140 kilowatt and 252 newton meters in the current car. Now, Mazda's marketing team, they're smart. They have said that it's recalibrated for better smoothness and refinement. But if I'm being totally honest, and personal opinion, this is almost certainly about bringing the engine under the NVES emissions thresholds to avoid penalties, which makes sense, right? And while the marketing might spin this detune as relaxed and quiet, the reality is this is just a step backwards in output, a car that was already not good with this engine, all right? I'm just gonna be honest. It just wasn't. It's now probably going to be worse. With the same 6-speed automatic transmission, which was fine 10 years ago, but won't be very efficient. And more importantly, there is still no hybrid at launch, despite Mazda confirming it is coming eventually, likely in 2027, which is a bloody long time to wait when Chinese cars exist and are updated every 6 months. In this moment right now, again, without having driven it, I just don't know why you wouldn't buy a BYD C-Line 6 plug-in hybrid over it, if you know what I mean. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Based on this alone, what would you buy? And no, this is not like Toyota keeping the same engine in the RAV4, because the RAV4's hybrid system is already brilliant, and in its latest form, it's actually more efficient, powerful, and refined. Mazda's carryover 2.5 litre is not really any of those things. It's thirsty, it's loud, and it's unrefined by today's standards. If you want to see what that engine is like in a Mazda 3, I'll leave that video linked down below. And here's another thing. The outgoing CX-5's turbocharged engine was actually good. It brought some punch and personality to the lineup, but that is gone too. Now you only get an even less powerful, even less torquey base engine. So yes, the new CX-5, it looks like a great SUV. And I mean in physical shape. It'll probably still be fine to drive, and loyal buyers will no doubt be happy no matter what. But as a strategic response to a shifting market, one that's rapidly moving towards electrification, this feels like Mazda is playing catch up rather than leading. And I don't think they're even catching up to the pack. And don't forget, this new platform that Mazda CX-5 uses, it can be traced back to 2012, and a lot has changed in the world since then. So what can Mazda do to turn this around? I don't want this video to be completely negative. Like I said, I actually have a lot of respect for Mazda, and I wish nothing but the best for them. So here's what I think they can do. Especially coming from a strategy consulting business background, I think Mazda made some pretty strategic errors in recent years, but it's important to acknowledge they could not have foreseen everything that has happened in the world. The push towards premium products with the CX large platform range, it made sense on paper back when it was being envisioned, probably well before 2020. But the timing was so brutal because COVID hit, and then the cost of living crisis, and suddenly consumers are now prioritizing value over premium features. Look at the Cherry Tiggo 4 Pro selling in Australia, now one of Australia's best-selling models. Why? It's cheap. And here's what I think Mazda needs to do. First, they need to accelerate their electrification timeline. 2027 for a CX-5 hybrid is simply too late. The technology is already here. They should be looking at bringing forward hybrid technology, even if it means licensing systems from other manufacturers initially. I would love to see a Mazda CX-5 with a BYD C-Line 6 powertrain. Why not? Secondly, they need to recalibrate their pricing strategy. The premium push has clearly backfired. They're losing volume without gaining the margins they expected. Going back to their roots of offering value-focused, well-engineered vehicles where they really stretch their dollar, it might serve them better in the current market. And we are actually kind of seeing this, because they're actually putting the 2.5 litre naturally aspirated wheezer of an engine into the CX-60 and pricing it more cheap. Great, but maybe they should have done that in the first place. Thirdly, they need to invest heavily in their platform development. That 2012 architecture is showing its age, and competitors are moving much faster with new electrification-ready platform. Their new large platform was not where they should have put their money. They should have upgraded all the platforms underpinning their biggest sellers, the CX-3, the Mazda 2, sure, in developing markets, but still, and the CX-5 specifically, what used to be their best-selling model. And actually, maybe it still is. I need to look that up. Let's fact check. By the way, this is the new Pixel Fold. You might want to go check out TechSauce if you want to see a review of that very soon. I'll leave that link down below. Mazda best-selling car. There you go. It's the CX-5. Wouldn't you put more effort into that? Finally, they need to rebuild the trust with media and consumers through transparency. The selective media approach they took for this launch, while again, I do understand it in principle, it just does not help in an era where information spreads quickly regardless. In fact, honestly, it probably provided Mazda way more press to have all of these stories leaked about the Mazda CX-5 than it would have had having one big bang. Instead, they had it over weeks and months. Doesn't that make a lot of sense, marketing-wise? What do I know? I just have my marketing degree. Regardless, Mazda has always been a company that does more with less, and their engineering heritage is really, really strong. But they need to act decisively and quickly to avoid being left behind in a rapidly changing automotive landscape. So after all of that, what do I think of the 2026 Mazda CX-5? Well, I think it's probably going to be a good car that's too little, too late. The interior improvements, they look genuinely impressive, except for some small things, and it'll likely still offer that distinctive Mazda driving experience. A slow engine, but a decent driving chassis. With profits down, electrification delayed, sales tanking in China, and new 15% tariffs being introduced, this CX-5 starts to look less like the future of Mazda and more like a holding pattern while they figure out what their next move is. So unfortunately, in its current state, Mazda is in trouble. But you don't have to be, because if you're looking for your next midsize SUV, do yourself a favor, compare your options. You can head to CarSauce Buy, where we will help you get the best deal, whether it's on the new CX-5 or something else entirely. No pressure, no sales tactics, just real negotiation on your behalf from real people who care and who don't care about the dealer, which is a win-win. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Are you gonna go out and buy the new Mazda CX-5? What do you think of it and the updates? And also, what do you think about Mazda as a whole at the moment? Do you also see them as struggling? I feel like my research was pretty conclusive, to be honest, but I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. Whew, tough video to make. Ciao for now.